everyone. This is Sherry Lopez with Pearl at the Mailbox. I am a human trafficking survivor and I am a grooming prevention educator. Today we are talking about one of the most misunderstood parts of grooming, how it often starts with kindness, not fear, not violence, not threats. Many times grooming begins with simple things that are hard to detect, like attention, support, encouragement, compliments, gifts, emotional connection, or someone making a person feel important or understood. That's all so very true as a survivor and having shared my story of how I was groomed many, many times, and I will continue to share until there's a better understanding of the grooming process. I would say every one of those ideas or parts of the grooming process, I should say, were included in mine. I received attention from my groomer. I had support. I was definitely encouraged in a lot of things. Oh my goodness, compliments is a big one. Love bombing, just compliments in general. That's a really big one too. And I really needed to be seen and heard, and I was. So this is why grooming is confusing, but it's also very intentional. A groomer knows exactly what they're doing and why they're doing it. And grooming with the intent to exploit is because they have an end goal of exploiting the person through usually trafficking and making money off of that person's body. You know, because healthy people can understand what kindness is. And so kindness doesn't look dangerous. But we need to talk about some things. So today we are going to discuss why groomers rarely appear dangerous in the beginning, how emotional manipulation develops, and why children and vulnerable adults living at home can still be groomed, such as in my case. Warning signs families often miss, and how prevention-focused conversations can reduce vulnerability. So let's get started. Get comfy. I hope you enjoy this reality check of what grooming really is about. Just a disclaimer, this is just for educational purposes only, not for any advice or such. And today I found a place where I'm able to record without my dogs present. I love my dogs, but they are very vocal. So anyway, let's talk about groomers rarely look dangerous. One of the biggest myths about grooming is that dangerous people always look dangerous. You know, I talk about this all the time, the creepy white van, the person that looks disheveled, that gives off this vibe of danger, danger, danger. When in reality, many groomers appear helpful, caring, protective, funny, very generous, very supportive. They can often be very successful, and they are trusted by other adults. That's because they realize that if an accusation is brought forward, it's often the child versus the trusted adult, or the adult that has the reputation of being a good guy, good girl in community, and therefore they are they're not really doubted. And sometimes all of these, you know, they actually are inside a family circle. And that's where familial trafficking can happen. But it also can be, so in the family circle, you know, it can be coaches, family friends, online gaming friends. That's a big one I talk about all the time, because these kids today, they play games and they play with the same people over and over and over, and they are viewed as friends. And so this is a whole new friendship dynamic that parents and caregivers and grandparents need to be aware of. Mentors, co-workers, teachers, romantic interests, trusted adults in the community. That's why grooming is often missed. Most people expect danger to feel uncomfortable immediately. But in reality, grooming often feels comforting in the beginning. And as I shared before in other podcasts, and if you've heard me speak, that grooming is a process. It can be a couple of days to a couple of months to even a couple of years. And in my case, I can see clearly that it was 3 months before I was sold for the first time and entered the world of being trafficked. Now, you talk about coaches, family, friends, mentors, coworkers, and stuff. This is certainly not to label all of them as predators. I believe there's many more good people out there than there are evil people, but that should not give anybody the comfort of saying, okay, well, I don't need to pay attention to the people in my children's lives. You do. For many different reasons. It could be bullying. It could be just encouraging to do something that maybe doesn't fit with your family values. It may not always be grooming with the intent to exploit. But if you're not aware of the adults in your child's world, it's kind of a disservice. And an adult will pay attention to that, especially if they are wanting to do harm. They're going to notice that. And it may increase a child's risk of being groomed. So here's some characteristics about a groomer. They may listen carefully, and the reason they do that is because they want to hear what is important to the child or the vulnerable adult, the person that they're trying to groom. They want to listen to what matters to that person. So how can they jump in and fill that need, which creates trust, which is the second step in the grooming process. So, you've got your victim. They're shopping for the victim for the first step. And then the second step is they've selected the person, their target, their victim, that they're going to now go through the rest of the 7 steps of grooming. The second step is building trust. So they're going to listen very carefully to the victim, the person that they have selected to try and groom, so that they can start learning how to fill the needs of that child or vulnerable adult. They're also going to give emotional support. So in my case, again, I was wanting to be seen. I was wanting to feel like I fit in. I wanted to feel like I mattered and I was important. And I was given a lot of emotional support in that area by them basically agreeing with me that, it was right. You do need all this support and all this help and everything like that. So I received the emotional support that I needed, and that was still part of the building trust. They may offer advice, which may not really be advice, but to a child it may be, and it can be unsolicited advice. Or they might say things like, you really are grown up for your age. I think maybe you should be able to stay out later than 10 p.m. Or they may say, hey, I see that you're struggling with something in school. Can I help you? Can I give you some suggestions on how to get around that? Gifts can be a big thing. It's not always. I don't say that's the one thing to look out for. I didn't receive any gifts when I was being groomed. They would be used as a ploy or a lure for me to hope that maybe I would receive a gift. But sometimes that can happen. So if your child is coming home with things that you didn't buy and they can't buy themselves because they don't have the means to, it's a very important thing to just kind of ask questions about it. Give rides. That's another one. So my recruiter was my high school boyfriend, and it was his father that trafficked me. Now, he did give me rides, but a big red flag that I should have paid attention to, but I didn't because my 15-year-old brain was so much into thinking I was in love with this boy, is that the boyfriend never, ever, ever came and picked me up at my house. He would meet me at a certain location and pick me up, and then he would take me to school. So that could be any type of giving you rights, just so you can, so that the groomer is getting the child or the vulnerable adult, the person that they're targeting, in an isolated environment to be able to, again, learn more about their environment, what they want, because it's all about, right now, it's building trust and filling needs. Another one is provide attention. That's a big one, because a lot of times people who are being groomed and then trafficked are seeking some type of attention, not meaning they're attention seekers, but maybe they're missing something in their home or their environment where they're just not feeling maybe as valued or as important as others in the home, and they may not vocalize it. So they'll provide attention, and they do that to make that individual feel special. And when you feel special as a child, you kind of navigate towards that because it's feeling special. And the thing that's kind of weird to think about with all that we just talked about to a child or a vulnerable adult, this makes them feel safe, because they feel like this person who is actually manipulating them actually in some weird way gets them. Especially if the child or the vulnerable adult is feeling lonely, isolated, insecure, misunderstood, or emotionally disconnected from their support system. That's just another thing to think about. Groomers often study emotional needs before manipulation begins, and that's what we just talked about, and that's absolutely right. So grooming can happen even while someone lives at home. One of the most dangerous myths is this: if my child lives at home, this could never happen. It did to me. Grooming can happen while a child or a vulnerable adult lives with family, attends school normally, goes to work, participates in sports or activities, and appear, completely fine on the outside. Many victims continue living their normal daily lives while being manipulated emotionally behind the scenes. And this is what happened to me. I went to school Monday through Friday, and I ended up being sold, trafficked on the weekends and over the summer. But I did continue to go to school. Today, grooming often happens through the phones, social media, gaming platforms, messaging apps, private conversation, and emotional dependency. And never, ever, ever totally focus on just online, because it still happens in person. So parents, always have your head on a swivel and just pay attention to the people in your life. Because a groomer does not always remove someone physically from their house at first. In fact, I was never physically removed from my home until I was 18 years old. Instead, they create emotional access. This whole thing of grooming is psychological manipulation and psychological control. It is absolutely amazing how powerful our minds are and how powerful it can influence what we think and then impact our behavior. Emotional connection can slowly become, or let's just say, secrecy, isolation, dependency, control. That's where it comes from. A vulnerable adult living at home can also be targeted through financial support, excess attention, love bombing, emotional manipulation, promises of love or safety, isolation from healthy relationships. This danger is not always physical access at first. In fact, usually it's not physical access at first. The danger is emotional conditioning. That's it, emotional conditioning. And because the victim still appears to be living, quote, a normal life, families often miss what is happening. So if you're not educated about the 7 steps of grooming, I encourage you to do so, because you might be able to spot something happening in someone's life that you know. So filling a need. One of the key steps of grooming is called filling a need. The need may be attention, validation, affection, emotional support, financial help, escape from stress, belonging, protection. That's just to name a few. Groomers identify vulnerabilities and position themselves as the solution. This does not mean the victim is weak. It means they are human. Every person has emotional needs. Groomers exploit those needs strategically. This is why prevention conversations are so important. Children and vulnerable adults who feel emotionally connected to safe people are often less vulnerable to outside manipulation. But again, the key is emotional. Everything is emotional. It is a mental manipulation game. When kindness crosses boundaries. So, how do we recognize when kindness becomes grooming? Healthy adults, they respect boundaries. They respect the fact that they leave kids alone. And groomers, they slowly test those boundaries. They want to see how far they can push somebody. And here are some warning signs that you might want to think about or pay attention to. It could be excessive private communication, secret conversations, special treatment, encouraging secrecy, isolating someone emotionally from safe people, giving gifts. Parents, you can give a gift to a parent or a caregiver to manipulate and groom them, or even to the victim that's being groomed, but the victim doesn't share that information with their parents. Becoming emotionally intense very quickly, making someone feel responsible for their emotions. That's hard. I know that's just so much to take in at one time. It's like, how do I notice this stuff? How do I pay attention to this? How do I do any of this? How do I know it's not just teenage behavior? How do I know that I should step in? How do I know if I should pay attention to what's happening or just not? Observe. That's what I say. Just observe. Watch what is going on in the life of the people around you, your kids, grandkids, things like that. If something feels off, it's usually the case. And then start asking questions. Another major warning sign is creating an us against the world mentality. Here are statements like, nobody understands you like I do. These are statements that a groomer is feeding to the person that they're grooming. And this is for isolation purposes and to start moving them further away from their safe support system. So like, nobody understands you like I do. You are so mature for your age. Young kids, especially girls, want to know and believe that they are mature for their age because they want so badly to grow up quickly. But when you get older, you wish things could slow down a little bit. Your family just doesn't get you. You can trust me with anything. These statements create emotional dependency, and dependency increases vulnerability. That's what they're doing. And this is also the isolation part of the grooming aspect. The victim is being fed these narratives by a groomer so that it's easier to continue to manipulate them. So let's just talk real quickly about survivor's perspective. As a survivor of grooming and human trafficking, I can tell you this. Many victims do not realize they are being groomed because grooming often does not feel dangerous in the beginning. It truly does feel like love, support, protection, attention, understanding, belonging. That emotional confusion is part of the manipulation. It's part of this process. Many survivors later struggle with guilt because they cared about the person who harmed them. This is a reality of being groomed and trafficked. It's like, how in the world did this happen to me? How did I let this happen to me? How come I couldn't spot it? And this is just something that survivors deal with all the time. I paused for a second just because, I struggled with that for a long time too. So my hope is that by educating about the 7 steps of grooming, that some other child doesn't have to go through it, because the guilt is common in grooming situations once you've gotten out and you look back. And it is one reason victims often do not immediately disclose abuse or exploitation, because people on the outside situation may say things like, why didn't they leave? Or why didn't you just leave? And why didn't you tell someone? Because grooming changes how a person sees the relationship. That is why prevention education matters so much, because the person who's in the process of being groomed may not even see what's happening to them. But people on the outside, if they understand the grooming process, may and can intervene and stop that. So I want to thank you for joining me for this episode of Let's Talk About It. If this conversation helped you better understand grooming, please share it with someone else. Awareness matters, conversations matter, prevention matters. At Pearl at the Mailbox, we teach what happens before trafficking begins, because grooming prevention can help stop exploitation before it starts. Please visit our website to learn more about our mission, our training programs, and our prevention efforts. You can also check out my books on Amazon, including From Victim to Voice, a prevention-focused book designed to help adults better recognize grooming and warning signs before exploitation occurs. We are currently working to place this book in the hands of teachers and educators, because this is everything in that particular book is all